It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Those were the words that had changed the common era on July 20th, 1969. Millions of people watched the first images from the moon on their television sets. Workers at NASA cheered, for that Apollo 11 was the first manned mission to land on the moon. The space race was over, and the United States had won.
Some say the moon. Why choose this as our goal? And they may well ask, why climb the highest mountain? Why 35 years ago fly the Atlantic? Why does Rice play Texas? We choose to go to the moon.
Those were the famous words of John F. Kennedy, which caused every American to anticipate a manned moon landing. Songs were made, as well as books and movies. But the world was not ready for what would happen after the crew of Apollo 11 would return to Earth. However, the space race had begun 12 years before the Apollo 11 crew had become the first humans to land on the moon. On October 4th, 1957, the Soviet Union had launched Sputnik, which was the world's first artificial satellite. The US, on the other hand, couldn't make a flight into low Earth orbit, and the hopes of the US being able to compete against the USSR's technology was easier said than done. Within a span of 5 years, the US spent billions of dollars into their space technology. And in 1962, John F. Kennedy revealed that a man would be sent to the lunar soil, and thus the space race had begun.
The real challenge that we coped with was the challenge of Sputnik, the international competition with the Soviets. They were putting a dog in space, then Yuri Gagarin, and made one orbit before we could even make a suborbital flight. But then, less than a month after that, the president said we're going to send a man to the moon and bring him back safely. And this was in May of 1961. There was an excitement. There was a pioneering challenge. And despite the setback of the Apollo fire in January of 1967, just 2.5 years before we actually made the landing. Despite that setback, we put things together, and the teamwork that was associated with the cooperation of industry, academia, the politics, and everybody was we're all caught up with the challenge of success. And I think that it's that awareness and that novelty, that international competition that spurred on to give us the teamwork that resulted in the world's most significant rocket engine development.
At the time, the moon was a dream goal that the two governments incorporated in the space race. The two rivals from their Cold War, the USA and the USSR. When the USA staked their flag on the lunar soil, USSR, now known as Russia, was in an outrage. Heat and tension continued to spread, as more and more debates ended with a fight. Risk for a nuclear war was in full effect, and nobody knew what to expect. While the US astronauts from Apollo 11 were in parades, the USSR were working on more plans to send more people to the moon. However, America had another plan up their sleeves.
Force. Here is a SAGE center on 24-hour alert. At its heart is a computer developed by a research team from MIT and IBM working with the Air Force. The SAGE computer speeds the information for decisions by man in our missile age. Every scheduled flight across American frontiers is recorded ahead of time on IBM punch cards.
With the IBM supercomputers, the US was able to prepare for more spacecraft and lunar missions. This led to the wake of Apollo missions 12, 13, and 14. Eventually, the USSR thought that there was no other way other than to fight for the rights to the moon as well. The UN had almost a dozen speeches before the conflict was converted to larger terms. NASA was stopped, and the UN made the two governments agree on the compromise. The world was standing on a pin. If one thing went wrong, the world could end with the nuclear annihilation. Both governments had to stop their research and start working on a deal. This made NASA take some budget cuts, ending up in the cancel of Apollo 18 and Apollo 9. In June 1966, the United States and the Soviet Union submitted draft treaties on the uses of space to the United States. Together, the two countries created the Moon Treaty, which states that neither the surface nor the subsurface of the moon, nor any part thereof or natural surface in place, shall become property of any state, international, intergovernmental, or non-governmental organization, national organization, or non-governmental entity, or of any natural person. In addition to this, the Outer Space Treaty states that the parties who sign are prohibited from placing nuclear arms or other weapons of mass destruction in orbit, on the moon, or on other bodies in space. Nations cannot claim sovereignty over the moon or other celestial bodies. Nations are responsible for their activities in space and are liable for any damage caused by the objects launched into space from their territory, and are bound to assist astronauts in distress. Their space installations and vehicles shall be open, on a reciprocal basis, to the representatives of other countries, and all parties agree to conduct outer space activities openly and in accordance with international law. However, only 11 countries signed the Moon Treaty, and a new plan was in need to be made. 2 countries then created the Outer Space Treaty, which states that outer space, including the moon and other celestial bodies, is not subject to national appropriation by claim of sovereignty, by means of use or application, or by any other means. In addition to this, the Outer Space Treaty states that the moon and celestial bodies shall be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. Outer space shall be free for exploration and use by all states. State parties to the treaty undertake not to place any objects carrying nuclear weapons or any other kinds of weapons of mass destruction, install such weapons on celestial bodies, or station such weapons in outer space in any other manners. States shall be responsible for national space activities, whether carried out by governmental or non-governmental entities. States shall be liable for damage caused by their space objects, and that states shall avoid harmful contamination of space and celestial bodies. While the Outer Space Treaty prevents a nation from owning the moon, it doesn't prevent a singular person from doing so. Due to the fact that 129 countries signed this treaty, it is still used to this day by every country who has signed or ratified it. After all of this controversy, the moon was still a dream for many people. Neil Armstrong stated, "We're getting to the moon because it's in the nature of the human being to face challenges. It's by the nature of his deep inner soul. We're required to do these things just as salmon swim upstream." Sadly, many nations backed away from this treaty, and the Moon Treaty is now classified as disarmed by the UN. The moon, the natural satellite revolving around our Earth, was left up in the air. The moon is left open for the future.